Well, this morning I'm bringing you the message from a unique location. I am here at the Royal Oak Farmers Market. It's Tuesday, so the place is pretty empty right now. If you look around, you can see that there's not much going on here. But I want you to imagine that it's a Saturday in the summer, and the place is full. I mean, the Royal Oak Farmers Market is one of the real true gems of our community. And if you come down here on a Saturday morning, the place is alive. The tables are full. Imagine the sights and the sounds and the smells of what this place is when it is alive and full of the community. Listen to the sounds of the conversations in the place, the sellers of the vegetables and the fruits, the smell of the fresh flowers, the fresh coffee. Often there's music happening in maybe one or even two locations inside of here. And if you come down here on a Saturday morning during the season, the place is alive and it is full, and you see your neighbors. It's where the community gathers here in our community. So why on earth am I bringing a sermon from an empty farmer's market on a Tuesday in the beginning of February on the first Sunday of Lent? Well, that is a really good question. The reason I'm doing that is because as we begin this Lenten story, we're beginning it by looking at that last week of Jesus' life in detail. And if we look at that last week, it really begins in the Jerusalem version of the Royal Oak Farmers Market. This is where Jesus begins his last week. We call it Palm Sunday, but really it's Jesus' entry into the community. And he goes where he knows that the people will be. 2,000 years ago, it said Jesus began the last week of his life by entering into Jerusalem and into the crowds of where the people are. If you close your eyes and imagine, you can hear the sounds of the crowded people who'd come to Jerusalem for Passover. And just like any good tourist event, there must have been booths of people selling goods and items and food and trinkets and souvenirs and all kinds of things that made the place come alive. And it's right then and there that Jesus decided to begin the last week of his earthly mission. We call this last week his Passion. You know what passion is. Passion's what you get excited about. Passion's what you get emotional about. Passion's what you get fired up about. Passion is something that you're willing to take a risk for. What kinds of things are you passionate about? Are you passionate about a sports team? Are you passionate about a hobby or an interest? Maybe you have a show or a movie franchise of which you are passionate. In this last week of Jesus' life, we discover he is passionate about people. And that's why he chose to begin the last week of his life right in the middle of where the people are. He came here to the Royal Oak Farmers Market. You know, it's important not just where people show up, but how people show up. Because where you show up says what's important, but what is equally important is how you show up. Now think about it. Imagine it. The buzz might have been going through the community. The buzz might be going through here. Imagine that the rumor in the crowd is that Jesus is going to show up at the farmer's market on a Saturday. The whispers are going through the crowd, and you might have some expectation about how Jesus is going to show up. I mean, this is the one who is claimed to be the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. There's rumors going around that Jesus is the Messiah, the chosen one of God. There is even this rumor going around that Jesus might actually be God incarnate, God in the flesh. So as the buzz started to go around the farmer's market, as people started to whisper about this Jesus who's going to show up, imagine how they thought he might come. They thought maybe he'd arrive on a big white stallion, fitting for a king. Maybe he'd arrive in the back of a chariot with his entourage, his army in tow as kind of a conquering hero. Remember that Jerusalem is under the occupation of Rome. And so maybe Jesus is going to show up with his army and get them out of there. It'd be like Royal Oak being overtaken by Berkeley. And we need to get those Berkeleyites out of here. Because, they're ruining our way of life. So the people had an expectation of maybe how this Jesus was going to show up in the middle of their farmer's market, in the middle of their community. And here's where the great surprise of the beginning of this first week of Jesus' life. And this surprise, it tells us everything about what Jesus was passionate about. Because Jesus didn't show up 2,000 years ago at the farmer's market in the middle of the Jerusalem town square with all the vendors all around him, with the place alive with people. No, he didn't show up on the back of that stallion. He didn't show up in a golden chariot. The story says Jesus began his week of passion on the back of a donkey. What a weird, strange way to enter the scene. What a strange way for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords to make his entrance. As I said a couple of minutes ago, you tell the world a lot by where you show up and also how you show up. Jesus shows up on this, his week of ministry, the penultimate week of his life, on the back of a donkey, a service animal, an animal that's not known for its strength, but an animal that carries things and carries people. He shows up on a working man's animal. And in doing so, he tells the world what he's passionate about. Jesus rides into the farmer's market saying, "The Son of Man has not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life for the community around him." Jesus shows up in a place where the people are, and with a symbol that says, "I am one of the people." and that your struggles are my struggles, and that your concerns are my concerns, and your hurts are my hurts, and your desires for a different world, a better world, are my desires too. So what would it be like if 2,000 years later, Jesus was going to show up here on a Saturday when the place is full and the people are here? What would Jesus show up in? I imagine the whispers around the place would be like he's going to be here, and then we'd be expecting him to show up in a stretch limo, right? Right? I mean, come on, be honest. Anytime that there's a stretch limo hanging out around, don't you kind of try to look in the windows just to see who it is? You figure if it's a stretch limo, it's got to be someone important. Usually it's just some kid that rented it for the weekend and it's not any big deal. But we look in there. It's got to be somebody important. Or maybe we'd expect Jesus to have gone down to the local National Guard armory and got one of the tanks and came in to say, look, I'm powerful and I'm here to provide protection and safety. That he'd roll up in here on that kind of a vehicle. Or maybe we'd expect him to show up in one of those great big monster trucks, right? Something that got attention, that showed he was powerful. So what do you think Jesus would show up in at the farmer's market today? In the midst of this moment in our world, if he wanted to show people that he was passionate about the lives and concerns and hurts of people like you and me, I've thought about it a lot this week. Maybe show up in a food truck. To give out free food to families and those who are hungry. I don't know, maybe show up in an ice cream truck. To give out ice cream to kids, because Scripture's clear. Jesus loved the kids. And kids love ice cream. Does ice cream solve the problems of the world? No. But does it bring a little joy while you're trying to live through the problems of your world? Maybe Jesus would show up like that. Maybe he'd show up in a mobile medical unit. Maybe he'd bring the vaccinations to us. Or maybe he'd be like Lucy in the old Peanuts comic, where he'd set up a little booth that would say, hey, need someone to pray for you? The King of Kings and the Lord of Lords would show up in a place like this telling us that he's one of us, and he's with us and among us. And he's here to be in service to and with us. Over these next weeks, as we look at the moments of Jesus' passion, the way that he entered this scene and this moment will continue to play out in each of these scenes. We will see him welcome the unwelcomed. We will see him pay attention to the widows and the orphans. We'll see him bend down and wash the feet of his friends. When's the last time you saw your governor, your president, your senator, your congressman show up to serve and not to be served? Jesus shows us what he's passionate about. He's passionate about community. He's passionate about service. He's passionate about humility and kindness and gentleness. And it's how he arrives on the scene 2,000 years ago. So we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to be passionate about the things Jesus is passionate about? And are we willing to show our passion in the way Jesus is willing to show his passion? I'm here today at the farmers market in the shadow of the brand new municipal center here in Royal Oak. It is a pretty impressive building. But I'm glad at least one public servant that I know in there well enters into this pretty impressive building every day with a servant's heart. In his own way, he rides in on the back of a donkey. It's my friend and our friend here in the community, Judge Derek Meineke. I had a chance to sit down with Judge Meineke this week and ask him, how on earth do you as a judge in this community, how do you bring your faith with you? And when you are arbitrating these important decisions, holding literal people's lives, people who have messed up and screwed up in your hands, how does your faith, how does the way of Jesus impact and inform you? I'm going to cut away here for a minute and let you listen to Judge Meineke and how he lives his faith right here in our community in a way that is, well, a lot like the way Jesus lives out his faith in the midst of the community around us.
Experiences here in Royal Oak, frankly, has been the relationship between the different churches, between different people of faith in our community. I really have appreciated, at least what I can see as a basic mutual understanding, like, hey, we're all neighbors here, we all have a general goal, and we're all children of God. So how can that... It makes all the other small differences seem not so small. I believe there's a core belief that I hold to, that people are basically good. And I recognize two things: we are all sinners,
Yep.
and yet none of us are beyond God's grace. While I was working as a law clerk, I saw the impact on a community that a district court judge can have. It's especially given the fact that it's exactly where you live. All the impact that you make is, amongst your friends and neighbors, and it gave me a lot of perspective. And the person that I see before me as a district court judge, it really is more of your neighbor who made some poor choices, not someone who committed an act of absolute evil. But someone where rehabilitation lies as an ever-present option. However a person comes into my life, the whole idea would be to view them, as a child of God and express that same level of care and concern that you would hope would be expressed towards you. In the judicial system, if you're not part of the solution, then you're absolutely part of the problem. Because standing by on the sideline, you are necessarily going to impact that person. They'll come in front of you. You don't approach it with a problem-solving approach, then you maybe give them a jail sentence, or you give them fines and costs that they can't afford, and then all you've done is become another hand in the pocket, another part of the story where this person lost a job. And that's and to me, there's no better opportunity, there's no better pulpit from where to make this kind of change than at the district court. One of our participants, after she graduated, she is someone who was very, in a really dark place with drugs, and now she is a family and a little boy, and has made a life for herself that she never thought possible. We all fall short. We all do. And yet at the same point in time, none of us are beyond God's reach. So if those two truths exist, and I can employ them in my interactions with people, although I am not obviously preaching from the bench, I still am, I like to say, doing honor to those core principles and beliefs that I have, that I think in the end allow me to serve others better. If I go into it with that basic, core idea, hey, as I sit here in my black robe, I still fall short, and we're all, hoping for grace. And if I could take that same mentality and apply that to the person who's got multiple drunk drivings, who has committed an assaultive act, and say, okay, well, let's see if this is an opportunity, rather than I've already drawn my conclusion and I'm going to move on. So I'd rather continue that approach of looking at each person not as a file but as an opportunity. That everyone's path is unique, and whatever it is that brings them, I would say, closer to a personal relationship with Christ is always going to be, I think, something that should be highlighted, celebrated.
Living his faith, well, kind of in the way of Jesus, a way of humility and justice. So, Royal Oak, first I have to ask us, as we get ready to go back into the world, how can we enter it like Jesus did? It was a couple of years ago, we were here as a church. It was the first ever community-wide family pride event, an event for and sponsored by LGBTQ organizations and families, as a way to say, you're welcome in our community. And our church was invited to be present here. We were right over there in that corner. And how did we Methodists show up? With crayons and coloring sheets and a little game that kids could play, and bracelets that said God loves you and there's nothing you can do about it. It was a bit of a risk, I suppose. But when you're passionate about the things Jesus is passionate about, sometimes you take those risks to be in the public square, saying, this is what it looks like when Jesus comes to town. Friends, it's been a long year, but spring is coming. And with that, there'll be more opportunities for us to be out in the world. And I hope that we show our passion for God and community in the way Jesus showed his to us. Hey, thanks for hanging out at the farmer's market with me today. Thanks to Robin Richardson, our own, who said, yeah, come on down here and do this. Thanks to Dave Beer, who's behind the camera, helping make this happen. But most importantly, thank you to you, a community that not only knows where to show up, but how to show up as well. Go in peace, my friends. It's been good to be with you this morning.